Difficulty does not make a good game. With the disparity in player skill higher than ever, one of the main challenges that developers are facing is trying to make their game balanced for players. How do you make a game that's difficult for someone who's been playing action games for 20 years, and also make it something that's fun and approachable for a new player? What is the perfect level of difficulty, and do hard games actually alienate people like I'm saying they do? I have a few examples ready to answer that question, but before we get right into it, I'm going to let you know right now, I will be talking about the final boss of Shadow of the Erdtree. If you have somehow still not been spoiled on that, here is your opportunity to click away. Okay, gone, not gone, let's start by talking about Radahn, one of the only bosses that FromSoft has had to nerf. Promised Consort Radahn is perhaps the hardest boss that FromSoft has ever made. But one comment that really stood out to me on my video on why Elden Ring is the final evolution of Souls-like combat was somebody going, did this dude really just call Radahn fair? And I'm going to defend that. Yes, Promised Consort Radahn is fair. All that he requires you to do to beat him is to play the game and not make mistakes. In fact, he even lets you make a few mistakes. He doesn't one-shot most builds. However, unlike other bosses, his combos do tend to just keep going. So if you get hit once, you better be ready to keep rolling, because his combo isn't going to stop. On top of that, when he does finally stop, you only have time for one attack or one heal. This is brutal. As much as people like to say that FromSoft bosses are hard, most of them actually let you reset fairly reliably. Their moves that chase you around the arena aren't quite fast enough to keep up with you, so you can run away and get a chance to heal. With Radahn, that is not the case. The opportunities that you have to get away from him are very limited, and because of the beams of light that rain down in his phase 2, you are usually better off staying close to him and finishing rolling whatever attack chain he happens to throw at you to get a chance to reset. This alone makes him very, very punishing. But is it unfair? Well, no. He's not breaking any rules of the game. He's not instantly killing you. If they wanted to make him unfair, he could constantly exude Deathblight aura. That would make him harder. Or they could make it so that his attacks had startups that were just a little bit faster than human reaction speeds. That would make fighting him an absolute nightmare, essentially forcing you to roll on prediction. But no, all of his chains are very clean. Most of them don't even require rolling a specific direction, though some do. He just doesn't stop hitting and has very long chains without a gap for any punishment. Other bosses you can get hits in by circling around during their combo chains. He will track you to the ends of the earth, and most of his hitboxes spin around him. This is hard, don't get me wrong, but is it unfair? No. Unfair is a move like this laser beam that Metter, the Mother of Fingers, has, which is literally undodgeable. Okay, there's one weird way to dodge it with Raptor of the Mists, but even that's inconsistent. That's unfair. You can't do anything about it, it just hits you. And if your HP is too low, it just one-shots you. So, unless I'm missing something, I can confidently say Radahn is fair. Yet, he wasn't fun. Why? People will say Souls combat is supposed to be hard, yet he received such negative feedback that he got what I believe is the hardest nerf FromSoft has ever done, effectively doubling his recovery on every single chain that he had. If FromSoft's design goal was actually difficulty, they didn't have to change him. He was beatable as he was. Yet his fight was so stringent on what was good against him that they decided to completely cut his difficulty for the sake of making more builds viable, and for the hope that more people would actually enjoy fighting him. What this shows is two things. One, FromSoft didn't want to make the hardest fight they could. They wanted to make a fight that pushed their system to its limits. It also highlights the core philosophy that Elden Ring is built on: the player's ability to overcome challenges in their own way. People were mad because Asmongold, a popular Twitch streamer, was beating the DLC by just holding a big shield in front of him. as though the fact that he wasn't fighting the bosses by dodging them all was some sin against FromSoft's design. But while yes, their combat is built in such a way that all enemies can be fought by exclusively rolling through them, and yes, that is a limitation that they inflict upon themselves in their design, the ability to face challenges in numerous ways was always what they valued. The difficulty is a byproduct of wanting to challenge the player, not wanting to be hard. And yes, there is a difference. In every single Souls-like game, starting at Demon Souls, if you're willing to go grind for levels, you can be completely overpowered very early on. If you can't beat something with the strategy you're trying to use or at the level you're at, you can always come back later. Their games are effectively a masterclass in modular difficulty. They build a challenge, and it's up to you to what extent you want to prep to overcome it. Their contract to you is only this: your core mechanics are enough to overcome any challenge, but levels sure do help. I believe that leaning fully into this design philosophy is why Elden Ring has the highest completion rate of any of the Souls games, because the various RPG aspects allow you to trivialize what could otherwise be something very difficult. Let's look at this devblog by the creative director of the first Berserker, Khazan, a game that I really liked, but I remember as I played it, thinking to myself, holy shit, I can't recommend this to anybody. The game, upon release, was the single hardest Souls-like game I have ever played. Fighting those bosses invoked the same feeling that I would get out of doing my level 1 challenge runs. I had no damage, I had no stats, and I'd get one shot. Fighting and overcoming these challenges despite that is what I like. Yet, every single fight, it got harder and harder. Even as I unlocked more combat mechanics and found more ways to more efficiently take out these enemies, I just was sitting there flabbergasted, because I could not imagine the normal player enjoying this. And sure enough, they didn't. Players would consistently not finish the game because it was too hard. And when the devs would ask them, hey, why didn't you finish the game? The people's response was that they would rather not play than drop the game down to easy. That alone shows two things. One, a lot of people are gaming with their egos, and easy modes hurt that. Two, games that are too hard do lose players. The more difficult that you make your game without ways to circumvent that difficulty, the more narrow your target audience becomes. And maybe you're the type of person who's watching this right now and going, well, I love games like that. That's fair, so do I. But almost everyone has a limit on what amount of challenge they're willing to take. If you're somebody who considers yourself to be very good at video games, I'm sure that there are still challenge runs that you've seen where you looked at it and you thought, man, even if I could, I would never want to do that to myself. That bar is different for every single person. And when you have games being made by massive teams, they can't cater to all skill levels, which is what I want to talk about next. One thing that I feel a lot of people lose perspective on when talking about difficulty is that it is always relative. And this isn't even exclusive to gaming. People are going to be better or worse at different things. But with gaming, for some reason, people tend to get oddly affronted when a game is too easy for them. There are people that struggle with Astrobot. There are also people that have grown up playing games all of their life. If your goal is to make your game hard, where do you even begin? How do you define hard? Do you look at the people that are doing speedruns and challenge runs of a game in a similar genre and try to scale it to that level? If so, I can almost promise your game will be a commercial failure. This really leaves you with one option: modular difficulty. Yet as we've seen with Khazan, if you make an easy mode, people will, out of ego, refuse to play it. Even if you're just this bright-eyed dev with good intentions going, oh yeah, they'll drop the difficulty down if it's too hard. Well, what Khazan did is initially they were trying to nerf things to be more approachable. Now they've decided to completely rework difficulty. What used to be called easy is now normal. There's challenging, which is the old normal, and there's hardcore, which rolls back all of the nerfs that have happened essentially since the game's launch to create an experience that was in line with their initial vision. What a lot of games get wrong with difficulty sliders, though, is that adding more health and damage to enemies without changing up the core gameplay in any way doesn't actually add challenge. And it's weird to say it doesn't add challenge because it does make it harder to do. But for most players, they'll call that artificial difficulty, because they're not actually being tested on can they perform the mechanics. They're essentially being tested repeatedly to see if they ever fail. That is frustrating and just feels like bloat. So if you're going to add a harder difficulty, in order to be engaging to players that are already good at this, it needs to add more mechanics or make timing more stringent. If you try to just rely on bloating enemy health bars, I'm not going to be more engaged. I'm going to feel like the game just doesn't respect my time. For something to be challenging and not tedious, I need to be questioning the entire way through if I can do this, not if I want to. Okay, so at this point, I'm sure that I've convinced you that difficulty matters a lot, which is the opposite of what I said at the start. I really should just end the video on that. Let me clarify and bring it back. Difficulty matters a lot, but the right way to build difficulty isn't to design for it to be hard. It's to design a core system and then build that core system throughout your game to the highest possible peak that you can, without breaking the rules to needlessly punish the player. I'll talk about Souls in a second, but I think the cleanest example of this is actually the Guitar Hero games. It starts out, and you're introduced to 3 notes, strumming, and you play some very simple songs. And eventually, if you keep at it, you'll end up playing Through the Fire and Flames on Expert Mode. Yet despite the difference in difficulty here, it never breaks its core rules. You are never given notes or rhythms that are impossible to play. When I say that you can't design difficulty, what I really mean is that good, challenging gameplay doesn't start there. Back to Promised Consort Radahn, I've called him the peak of difficulty. That's not because I think he is the hardest boss that FromSoft can make. It's because with their current systems, I don't feel like they could go any harder than this and still make a fun fight. They could make him harder, even within the realms of staying fair. They could also make him harder by giving him a Deathblight aura, giving him no recovery frames between attacks, and having Mikola hop off and gank you. And you'd probably still see comments saying that you're bad if you can't beat that. Anyway, I would rather see expansion via new mechanics at this point than to see a harder Radahn fight. I have fan mods if I really want that, and most players won't. What I'm really trying to say in all of this is that designing your game to be difficult doesn't mean that it will be fun. You're much better off making a game that's fun and then adding the difficulty later. And finally, I don't think that Souls games are hard. Every single one of them can be broken and made easy. By knowing what's strong, knowing how to play them, you barely even need to interact with any of the core combat if you don't want to. But that doesn't mean that winning a Souls game isn't an accomplishment. It is something you should be proud of, because what Souls does is it presents a challenge to you, and it does not compromise if you can't do it. Instead, it dares you to adapt to it, and how you choose to do it to overcome the obstacles is what makes the game fun. So yeah, difficulty does not make a good game, but by prioritizing fun and pushing your core mechanics to the limit, you can make a game that is challenging and rewarding to play. Alright, I hope I verbalized that well. I've been thinking really hard about what makes a challenging game fun and engaging. And I wanted to make a video on it, but there's just so much to the topic of difficulty that I kind of was struggling to find a core point that I wanted to talk through. The one that I ultimately decided on here is that designing a game on the idea that you want it to be difficult first and foremost is a way to create a game that is hard to beat, but missing the core part of what makes these hard games fun. I also wanted to highlight a little bit about the struggle of making a game challenging and what that actually means for your player base. There's a reason Astrobot won Game of the Year, and it's that so many players could enjoy it. And yes, it had some challenge to it, but most of what carried that was presentation, music, and all these other things that elevate it to still be enjoyable even if it's easy for you. And listen, if you think that this was all a shit take, feel free to tell me in the comments. I'm not worried about being wrong, but I do hope that I explained my point well, because that's what I'm really trying to do. Anyway, I've finally finished Black Myth Wukong, so that video should be coming soon. That game was very long. I also got inspired to do a video on RuneScape of all things, so feel free to guess what I want to talk about there. And yeah, till next time, see ya.